Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 438 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So go and pick that up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, there are a ton of dysfunctional companies out there. I've worked for a few myself, and perhaps that's why I find myself as an entrepreneur most days. For me, it's very frustrating when a company says that they have certain corporate values on their website, and then the employees don't share those values in the things that they say and the things that they do. Since many of our listeners are going to be choosing a company that they are going to work for after graduation, I felt it was really important to talk about dysfunctional companies today and how we can identify them before we even start working there. So our next guest is Joel Dubin. He is a retired cybersecurity consultant turned humor author and a foreign languages enthusiast. The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies was inspired by stupidity he observed at companies who sabotage not only their security, but their business as well. The 7 habits are the most common problems he saw at screwed up companies around the world. This isn't a typical business book. It's a humor book poking fun at office politics, bureaucracy, and toxic work environments, all ingredients of successful dysfunctional companies. It's sort of an anti-manual of how not to run a business. Joel is the author of both editions of the Little Black Book of Computer Security and has an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University and a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University. Some great schools. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Michael.
This is going to be a lot of fun. I tell you what, I've certainly worked for my share of dysfunctional companies.
Oh, sure. We
So
all have.
I'm sure
I
many
can
people
see
have.
I can see bruises on your forehead from banging your head against the wall, Michael. So I
Oh
know.
my God. You have no idea. I've literally spent weeks banging my head against the wall saying, why is this happening? This is totally ridiculous. So I'm glad that you're finally shining a light on just how ridiculous some of these companies can be. But before we get to companies, I like talking about colleges. You decided
Sure.
on Northwestern University for
Yes.
your undergraduate experience. You even stayed there for your MBA. So
Yep.
why did you decide that Northwestern was the right place for you?
Couple of reasons. Northwestern, first of all, is a great school. It's a top school, and it happened to be at my doorstep because I live right in Chicago. So, I didn't have to relocate, but that wasn't the sole reason. Northwestern had the programs that I was looking for, that I was interested at the time. I was interested in journalism. They had Medill School of Journalism, and I took classes there. And then, years later, when I went into the MBA program, they had very good programs that I was interested in as well. I was kind of at that time looking at real estate. It was kind of the hot industry at the time, and they had the programs. In addition, if you remember, Business Week used to have, or they may still have it, a ranking of business schools. And at that time, it was ranked as number one, above other schools like Harvard and Wharton. So definitely, and again, right at my doorstep, I didn't have to go very far to go to a really good quality school.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have such a great school at your doorstep. That certainly was
Yeah,
convenient, if nothing else.
yeah, absolutely.
And you're a retired cybersecurity consultant, you're a recovering IT security auditor. You've worked for
Yes.
some dysfunctional companies as well. Tell our audience, like, what was the impetus? What made you want to write this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies?
Well, I think in some ways it was personal therapy that once, I kind of got up and grasped from air when I retired. I needed to do something to kind of get it all of my system, kind of a tell-all kind of a book. But when you mentioned that, I worked for dysfunctional companies, beside working for some dysfunctional companies, it was also many of the companies that I observed. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Michael, when you mentioned that, there's so many times we see these companies that say one thing and do another. And I have a whole chapter in there about how poor communication is the way to effectively spread the message. I'd sit in a lobby and I'd see these mission statements. And I understand, business leaders tell you got to have a focus and a mission statement. I got it. Makes sense. but I'd sit there and I'd read these mission statements. They're written in corporate speak gobbledygook. And then when you go in the door, the toxic crap that you deal with doesn't match what's, on these mission statements. So for me, partly therapeutic, partly, what I observed, and I kind of want to spread the message. And I think for your listeners who are basically, in some way starry-eyed university students, kind of ready to go out there and attack the world, I think I can give you some tips about what to do.
I think that's great. And we certainly talk about that in fraternity and sorority life too. I mean, all of these fraternities and sororities, they have stated values. And
Yeah,
those stated values are things like scholarship and service, brotherhood and sisterhood, truth and justice, all of these
right,
things. But like, we have to actually do what we say we're going to do. Otherwise, who's going to want to join a group of hypocrites? I mean, nobody.
right, right. Exactly.
So yeah, companies, it's really the same thing. So I guess for the college students who are listening right now and they're trying to figure out which company they're going to work for after graduation, how can they evaluate their potential employers and figure out which ones are dysfunctional before they commit?
Okay, this is what I recommend. I was not in a fraternity when I was at college, and I have a big support for fraternities, but I had a lot of friends that were in fraternities,
Mhm.
and what I noticed is they built networks and they built friendships that lasted for a lifetime, right? So some of my friends now, even years later after being in school, they talk about their fraternity or sorority, buddies, and they built these networks. So my advice is that go beyond things like the glass door, social media. Use your Greek network. Find people inside those companies that you can talk to directly, so they can give you the straight dope. So that's my recommendation. Dig deep, talk to people, and see exactly what their impressions are. If they say, "Oh God, I've been here for 10 years. It's horrible. I can't get to first base with my boss. We're constantly in meetings. I don't know what's going on," then that's kind of a signal. Maybe this is a company to avoid. One of the ways that I mentioned in the book of how to evaluate a company, the humorous side, I call it the asshole density ratio, which is determining the number of assholes within a square area, of the office, within a number of cubicles. So you can get an idea of how high the ADR is at a company, based on talking maybe to some of your Greek buddies, and networking that way. Some companies, some industries, I was in consulting, it's very high pressure, high stress, a lot of turnover, a lot of egos kind of battling each other, people building their little kingdoms within the company. I noticed. So those companies and like professional services, law, accounting, consulting, they tend to have what I call high ADRs, But again, each company is different. And I don't want to be bashing all companies in general. Talk to people personally. Don't just rely on social media or these rating websites like Glassdoor, which is very good, but you see kind of some oddball comments in those. Better to talk to people directly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as a college student, it's actually really easy to use LinkedIn and locate people that work for the company that you're
Yeah,
trying to get to. And especially if you are a fraternity brother or a sorority sister. And you know what? Even just a college student reaching out, you should be reaching out all the time because when a college student reaches out to me for whatever the reason on LinkedIn,
yeah,
as an example, I know that they have nothing to sell me. They have nothing, right?
right,
And all they're doing is trying to get more information so that way they can make better decisions about their career or where they go to work. So, because they have nothing to sell me, then I am very likely to actually say yes to that meeting. Now, the meeting might not be the same day. You might have to wait
right,
a week or two because my schedule is full, but I will eventually talk to you and maybe set up a Zoom with you. So, you really should ask these professionals for maybe 15 minutes, explain to
sure,
them you're a college student, you have nothing to
right.
sell. You're just trying to learn about the industry or about the company that they work for. And I'm promising you that more likely than not, this
Yeah.
person will say yes to you as a college student.
And if they don't, Michael, that's a signal to you too that this might not be a good environment. And beyond the Greek network itself, which is usually a strong, powerful network, just use your alumni name. I can use my Northwestern MBA, for example, go in the directory, and even if it's someone that's from a different year, different industry or something like that, I can say, hey, I went to Kellogg such and such year. I'm looking for information about X. Can you help me out?
Mm.
So yeah, use that network. You got a powerful background there to work with.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about customer service. I really
Oh yeah.
believe that customer service is the key to very successful companies. I have a big following on TikTok right now, and I'm very frustrated at their customer service. There's
Oh
some
boy.
areas of functionality that aren't working, and they've basically outsourced all of their customer service to other countries. And it's like, and working, I'm getting no results. I've had an open case with TikTok for like 4 months. Four
Oh
months.
boy.
And
Yeah.
it still hasn't been resolved. The original case is still open and still unresolved. And I have huge, number of followers on TikTok, and I'm a huge personality there. So
Yeah.
why are so many companies that are supposed to be good, that are supposed
Yeah.
to be leading the way, why are so many companies bad at customer service?
So I have a whole chapter in this. I call it Habit 5. Human contact with customers is prohibited. And basically, I think part of it is automation. Now, I get the picture. A large company, they may get millions and millions of calls. They have to do something. But how many times have we called and you get an incomprehensible menu and there's
Mhm.
no way to get to a human being, right? And you're punching keys and maybe you'll get the right sequence of keys to what you want. I call that menu bingo. But basically I also say that a dysfunctional company that shouldn't be allowed because it's too clear, it's too simple. I guess in a nutshell, in one word, it's partly automation. And I think it may get worse as we have like AI, we have these bots where you think you're actually talking to a person and you're not. But yes, customer service, I have a lot of horror stories in there and I talk a lot about it in the book. How to improve it? It's difficult because you say you have an open case with TikTok for 4 months. I mean that's fairly typical. I again I have a lot of personal stories. I had when my father died, and we had to change the credit cards, and I will not name the credit card company. I was on the phone for an hour with the credit card company to transition the card to me and my mother. Well, my mother had dementia. She's kind of squawking on the phone. I says, "Mom, just say yes." Then I get a letter from the credit card company saying, "We're sorry to hear of the death of Joel Dubin." I called him up and I said, "I'm Joel Dubin. I'm still alive, but I think you're trying to kill me." So I think the answer is just, to kind of have less automation and maybe streamline those menus. Those are the kinds of things that it's definitely a huge problem. It's a big issue.
It is, and it's only going to get worse with those AI bots that you're talking about, whether it be on the website or perhaps even over the phone. I mean, it's really scary where that all could go. One of the reasons why I've stayed away from large companies in my career is because all of the layers of bureaucracy at many of these institutions. It's so hard to get things done. Is there any way to eliminate all of that bureaucracy, the overlap, the lengthy decision making at these companies to make them more efficient without showing a ton of people the door?
Right. Well, again, not to be in defense of bureaucracy after I bash it in my book, but in a very large organization, you have to have some order, you have to have some sort of divisions of labor and some sort of organization. So just like I mentioned to your listeners, as students kind of building a network, to learn about the company, once you're in a company, build an internal network. Get to know this one, that one, any way that you can meet people and not people just in your department or in your functional area. Get to know people maybe in accounting or in legal or in marketing or whatever. Let's say you're having a problem with an expense report. You'll know who to talk to and you can actually talk to someone directly rather than going through this large bureaucracy. Again, it's unavoidable. And, in the book, I don't really give an answer of, what to do about bureaucracy. But one of the humorous things I mentioned there that the real business is done in the break rooms and in the bathrooms. And what I meant by that is there's these underground networks which often work within these companies. And I would say build them and use them. That's the best way to do it.
I like it. That is good advice. How do we eliminate all of these unnecessary meetings that we all know that could be an email? It seems like this problem is extremely common.
Yeah, it is very, very common. So I have seen people literally go from meeting to meeting to meeting. They never leave their desk. And, I put in the book there, I recommend that they have their headphones surgically attached to their head because it takes too much time to take them on and off. And I also talk about in their meeting police, people that are in the hallways with armbands that say MP that will assign you to meetings. Because I have a chapter in there that says if you are not in a meeting, be assigned to one. Yeah, meetings are definitely one of the bane of the existence of many companies. So my answer is be smart and be assertive and put your foot down. One of the things I talk about, I call them tweens, TWMs, the weekly meeting. Again, sure, there are certain types of projects where you actually have to meet each week to milestone and so on. I get it. But then there's been plenty of what I call tweens. They're right in the middle of my damn day. I'm in the middle of something else. Got to go to the meeting. I go to the meeting. Nothing new. They're talking about their pets. They're talking about their kids. They're talking about their vacation. Just say, I have nothing to report this week. Let's cancel the meeting this week. So kind of try to put your foot down where possible. Again, you may not have control over these things, but meetings have their whole culture all to themselves. I make a joke about how, when you go see a company and you might see people in a meeting in a conference room that have been in there for days without food and water. You may see people getting nauseous in these meetings. I talk about a whole thing where, when employees, when you started a company, I call it employee disorientation, getting you ready. One of the survival kits in there, part of the survival kit is, like the laser pointer, right? So you can point during the meeting. And then I say vomit bags in case you get nauseous during the meeting. I was nauseous during many meetings, so I used to think about that quite a bit. So yeah, the short answer is the serious answer. If the meeting isn't necessary, if you have the power, cancel it. You don't have to have it.
So here's another off the cuff question. Is your favorite TV show The Office and your favorite movie Office Space?
Yes. Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes and yes. How did I know that?
Yes.
It's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. How'd you know?
Those are really classic. They
Yeah,
are.
they are very clever. But I think my book it plays on that theme, but I think my book is unique. It's a little different. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, retention is something that a lot of universities are struggling with, and certainly retention is an issue for some of the best companies in the country. So, how can companies not only hire the right people and bring the right people in, but also keep their best employees instead of losing them?
okay, so here's kind of a general question, and not to sidestep it, but kind of look at the whole thing of HR. Just as we talked about customer service, the problem is automation. HR is very similar. So you see a company you like, you go to the website, you see a job, there's a job posting, you go, that's perfect. That's the job for me. You click on the link, it asks you to fill out some long form, right? And then attach your resume, whatever. You submit it, you get some sort of a cryptic email saying, your resume is blah, 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 right? So, and then you never hear from them, right? So what happens is companies look for keywords in resumes, and a creative resume is going to be missed. So creative individual. So I mentioned the book, One Way to Get Your Resume Attention. Of course, this is jokingly, just put the word asshole somewhere in the middle, and then your resume will be picked and put into the pile to be reviewed. But seriously, it is an issue. And again, getting back to what I mentioned, earlier in answer to your earlier question, network, network, network. So what I say is, let's say you see a job, you've already networked, your Greek buddy, right, is in there from your Greek system, or he's related to, he went to a fraternity, he was a fraternity brother from someone else that you knew, right? And you say, hey, I'm applying for this job. Often those internal people can get your resume in and get it reviewed. So you may still have to go through that process, right, online, but at least your resume will be reviewed because, Joe or Sally within the company will say, hey, I know this guy. I went to school with him. Give him a look, and recommend. And they often, a lot of these companies have incentives. They'll have a way where they'll pay like a little bonus to the employee for bringing someone in. But HR is kind of another rat's nest, like with customer service, because I think a lot of good people are missed because of these automated systems, and anything out of the ordinary that might be creative, that might be useful, gets lost. Again, try to do your internal networking first. I would say, honestly, most of the jobs I've gotten, the past several jobs, almost all through LinkedIn, through people that I knew. I never got anything through, oh, I like this company and that looks like a good job. You send it in, you never hear.
Mhm.
You know, it's,
Yeah, I think
I
you're
think some of
absolutely
these
right.
resumes disappear into outer space.
Yeah, you're right about that. I think every college student should have a LinkedIn account. I'm always surprised when I start talking to a college student. I ask them, "Do you have a LinkedIn account?" And they're like, "No." To me, I mean, that is like the first place you got to start is have a professional photo, create a LinkedIn account, and use a whole bunch of keywords in your bio that relate to your industry and the job that you're seeking. And then, just fairly regularly go on there and post in your feed something that you learned that week within your major or something you learned, within your college student organization that relates to the job that you want, and put that
Yeah,
out in the ether. And as you start building up your network, people are going to read that stuff and you
yeah.
become the expert in that niche.
I think maybe some college students, and I can't speak for college students, but just my thought is off the cuff is that, they look at all these profiles and they see people with these long pedigrees and these long resumes. They go, oh, gee, I'm not even in the work world. What I put up there? Well, what you can put up there is your skills. You can get recommendations because, even though I recommend my peers recommend me. Get someone say, hey, Sally really has a good background in network security for IT. I've worked with her and so on. Again, very good post. You should always be training. One of the things that you should always be looking at, I may be digressing a bit, but your students in schools, they should not be looking at or thinking of the company as an end in itself, because even the most powerful CEO could be kicked out the door. You could be laid off at any moment for any reason at any time. You should never think that you're going to be comfortable at a company. So the two things you should always be doing is always networking, go to conferences, go to classes, upgrade your skills, and always be aware, be prepared, have a resume updated regularly just in case the parachute drops. You think some of these CEOs are so powerful, and some of them are very powerful. Sales dip one quarter, the board says, screw it, we're getting him out of here, right? Or him or her out of there, and they're gone. They may have been a competent CEO, but sales dipped, Wall Street wasn't happy, they're gone. As I say, the corporate angel of death could strike at any moment. So you should always be prepared and always kind of have a back door.
Yeah.
Don't
I
look
like
at the
that.
company as the end.
Yeah, I like that, always networking. I think that's incredibly important for college students to hear and really digest because, the worst time to network is when you really need a job. The
Right.
worst time to network would be like a week before graduation. Like, no, you should have been committed to this, for all 4 years while you're in college, talking to professors, talking to employers, building out your network on LinkedIn, posting on a regular basis, and networking in your industry, in your niche, and meeting people that are potential employers. If you wait until a week before graduation, you've missed the boat.
And LinkedIn makes those features easy to use nowadays. I remember years ago, pre-LinkedIn, I lost a job in the morning, and because I was really diligent about networking, that afternoon I was already interviewing. I was
Beautiful.
calling people and I was already out ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, good
So
for you.
something to think about.
Yeah. A lot of companies now, when we talk about the employees, many of them would prefer, I think, to be remote, just because of, traffic and the cost of going to work every day and the wear and tear on your car, on your body.
Yeah,
I gotta, spend a whole bunch of money on clothing for, to be in the office. What are your thoughts on remote employees? Do you think
I
that
have a
corporate America should continue to head in this direction of remote employees after the pandemic? Or are we doomed to go back to the office because our company spent so much money on real estate?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this and a lot that I discussed in the book. In fact, the book was actually almost done a couple of years ago, and then COVID hit and everybody was remote, and I had to add all this stuff about being remote. And so one of the things I say, dysfunctional companies always put their offices in inconvenient locations, right? So you have employees that are communicating and commuting, not communicating, they are trying to communicate, but commuting to the office, and they're just fresh and crisp after being in traffic for 2 hours and ready to rock and roll. So the honest answer, Michael, is that I think really is a hybrid environment or depending on the industry and the employee. There are certain jobs that do require a presence in an office based on either the industry. I've heard, like, for example, investment bankers say, it's the body language of the parties involved in the deal that are more just as important as all the numbers and all the legal pieces of the deal, and you have to kind of see what people are doing. And there's other jobs where it doesn't matter at all. Now, the last company that I worked at before I retired didn't have an office in Chicago, so I was entirely remote. So when COVID hit and they started closing the offices, it didn't really impact me because I was already remote. And I was one of the most productive employees. I personally preferred to be remote. I found in the office, I was being distracted. A lot of the things that are in the book, for socializing activities, people come by and want to chat at your cubicle, and I could focus at home. Other people at home, they got the dog, they got the screaming kids, they got this, they got that, and they can't really focus, so there's a lot of distraction. So, A, it depends on the individual. B, it depends on the industry. And I don't kind of go say, oh, we must go remote or we must go, in the office. My answer would be flexibility. I think what's the wrong approach is where a company kind of blanket says you must be in the office. We're going to cut all remote work out. Well, hey, things happen. Also, life happens. Maybe you got to take a sick kid to the doctor all of a sudden, right? Or the car breaks down or something like that. So you got to be flexible. So my answer is a hybrid environment and none of this draconian, you must be in the office. That's the wrong approach. You
Yeah.
kind of have to look at case by case, company by company, individual by individual. I have a lot of jokes in there about, I say that remote employees must be clothed, right? And they should always be clothed, even from the waist down, because in case they accidentally stand up, when you see them in their undies, not cool at all. I talk about, when I was working remote and I did all these security assessments, I can't tell you how many dogs would bark in the back with screaming kids. And I say in the book about how the barking dogs and the screaming kids actually add more information than the people in the meeting, you know?
That's very clever. I like that. And
Yeah,
I think you nailed it. I think it's flexibility. I think that is the answer going forward. Listen, you're a Chicago guy, so you'll appreciate this. I mean, God bless State Farm, in Bloomington, Illinois. I've been to Bloomington. I went to visit my best friend who works for their headquarters. God bless it, but it's nothing but, agriculture. It's farms.
right.
There's really nothing going on there.
Yeah, I've been
And
there. I
yeah,
know.
and so like it's a beautiful facility. It has, tons of employees there
Yeah,
in Illinois, which is great. I love that they're a big employer, but I think why they're successful is the flexibility. They allow their employees to work from home a certain number of days. There are actually some employees that report to that office of State Farm in Bloomington, Illinois, and they'll actually just fly in. They'll basically work there for a couple of weeks and then they'll fly back home and spend another couple of weeks at home. And so that way they're allowed to essentially keep their family intact if they're in schools in another
right.
area of the country that is a little bit more how should we say populated,
Yeah,
then they can still make that work. So I think the reason why they're successful is the flexibility, and I appreciate that about State Farm.
yeah.
You know,
I
so
talk a lot also about road warriors, which are not really remote employees, but they have to be connected, on the road. But there are certain the nature of jobs where people are out constantly, on the road and they have to meet customers. This is distinct from the customer service where I say you shouldn't be talking to customers. There's certain, like for instance, as a consultant, I had to often go out to the site of a company. I was partially road warrior at times in my career as well. So yeah, flexibility is definitely the key.
I agree. I think that's the way forward. So hopefully the employers will listen to your advice there, and they'll be flexible. And I think that's the way to attract younger employees because I do think that Gen Z, they appreciate, being able to work from home every now and
Right.
then. They appreciate maybe having the comfort of a pet at home while they're in the office. It's comforting to them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's this is the law of the land. I'm not saying that everybody is qualified to work from home. I can see that if you, are very tempted to go and take a nap every day or play
Yeah.
video games, then maybe you're not suited to be a remote employee, right?
Right. So yeah. And make sure those pets are trained to contribute to the meetings.
That's right. We expect
Yeah.
smart pets that can
Yeah.
contribute to our Zoom meetings, not the pets that have nothing to contribute. Please.
I mean, I had a company I was doing an assessment, and this woman had her cat was going back and forth in front of the screen, and we had to put in that particular report, we had to put the names of everybody we interviewed. And I was gonna ask her, what's the name of the cat? I'm gonna put in the report and say advisor to the team, something, team mascot. It was
Absolutely.
hilarious.
Absolutely. If nothing else, it just made the meeting a little bit more fun and a little bit more
Yeah.
enjoyable for everybody. So, all right, this is good. So, we do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast, and I do get to Chicago very often. There is some
Oh,
wonderful food
oh,
in
Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
where should I go these days for a great meal in Chicago?
Okay. Well, it depends what you like. Chicago has everything, every
Yeah.
possible type of cuisine, as well as every ethnic type of cuisine. It's a very, very ethnic city. So kind of on the high end, if you like really good steakhouses. Downtown, there's The Cut, which is
Yes.
in River North,
Uh-huh.
and then there's Gibson's, which is really, really a famous steakhouse, right?
Hmm.
If you like pizza, Chicago's famous for its pizza. There's Lou Malnati's, which has deep dish. They also
Yes.
have restaurants downtown. And Italian, God, we could have a whole separate podcast just about the million Italian restaurants. A lot of Greek restaurants, Middle Eastern, you name it. And then also plain old American food, hot dogs and hamburgers. There's Portillo's here in Chicago,
Oh yeah.
large chain, top-notch hot dogs. Hamburger Chicago was also known for its hot dogs. The Oscar Mayer facility has an outlet here in Chicago on Clybourne Avenue where you can get a great hot dog and shrimp and fish, a lot of fish places. So yeah, a lot there. But yeah, downtown, high end, expensive, but good quality steak places. The Cut and Gibson's are two great restaurants downtown.
Yeah.
Pizza, Lou Malnati's.
Absolutely. Joel knows his food right away. I can tell he
Yeah.
knows what's going on in terms of good food in Chicago. He named all the right restaurants, so that's how you know he's a real
Yeah.
person from Chicago and not somebody who's just visiting. And Portillo's, by the way, is absolutely amazing too. They have a restaurant there in Bloomington, Illinois, near the
Oh,
state
they do.
office, and I got a chance to go and check out Portillo's. It was delicious. Very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
They're a great chain.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a great chain. Very good food. All right. So if our listeners, if they want to pick up your book or they want to engage with you, perhaps about speaking opportunities on a college campus to talk about dysfunctional companies, where should they go to connect with you?
Okay. My book is on Amazon. So, The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies.
Mhm.
As well, I can be reached at dysfunctionalcompany@yahoo.com.
Perfect.
Okay. So
Very
I'm
good.
still in the process of setting up all my social media because this is all brand new
Yeah,
book. But yeah, that's the way I can be reached. Travel right now a little bit difficult, but just contact me
I love
if
it.
you have questions or you're interested. Glad to help your people.
Really good, Joel. The name of the book on Amazon, it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Dysfunctional Companies. Go and pick up that book today. It is fun. It is a humorous read. And of course, in any good joke, there's always some truth underlying the really
Oh
good.
yeah, yeah. This is how not to run a company. So great.
So I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
being with
me
us
too.
today,
Thank you
Joel.
for having me.
Of course. And to our audience, if you enjoyed this conversation with Joel, I want you to like it and I want you to share it with other college students that need to read the book. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much. Bye for now.